Hi, my name is Michelle. I am coming here to tell my story. This is something that I need to do, that I have felt a lot of shame about doing. But I think that because I'm a really private person and I don't really share my life like that, it gives a lot of power to my story, what I don't say. And so I want to give power to what I do say and try to heal and overcome from this story and also just share it. And I pray that you receive this with an open heart and no judgment and whatever. So like I said, my name is Michelle Minter. I was born on July 3rd, 1986. I am 30 years old. I'm a Cancer. What's up? I was born to a mother who was struggling with drugs. I was born addicted to drugs. However, it isn't contest. Like, I grew up in foster care, and so like if you're a part of the state, you have like a file that documents everything that your like entire life essentially while you're in state's custody, and probably before that. Well, definitely before that, because that's how I know, or how I was told that I was addicted to a certain kind of drugs. But my mom says that that's not true. It was a different situation. So, and I met my mom a few years ago. I found my mom a few years ago. And so, I don't really know the truth about the beginnings of my life in any real specific way, but I do know that I was born premature. I know I was addicted to something. I don't know what that is. And I didn't stay with my mom. My mom says I stayed with her for a period of time, and then I moved to West Virginia to stay with my grandmother, who lived in Princeton, West Virginia. But shortly after I went to live with her, she found out she had cancer. My mom told me that I had an aunt who I'm named after, whose name is Shelly, who needed a kidney transplant. My grandmother had gave her her kidney, and then shortly after that she got kidney disease, cancer or whatever, and my grandmother was a Seventh-day Adventist, and she didn't believe in, I think, modern health care or something, so she didn't get treated, and she died kind of quickly due to the cancer. And after that, I was kind of, I think, like, I spent some time with family members, but that didn't work out, and I eventually ended up in foster care. But I do think something that's interesting about that, a lot of the stuff I didn't know that much about, but because I found my mom in recent times, she's been able to like shed some light on some stuff that I didn't really know before. And she told me something that I found super interesting, because I don't know if people know me or have interacted with me in person. I'm not like a super open book, and I'm kind of standoffish, especially if I don't catch a vibe. It's just not, I can't. And I remember feeling like when I was younger, this is kind of stupid, but whatever. I remember having this memory of being at someone who I knew was my family member's house, but I didn't know who it was until my mom like shared this with me. And I remember being like, remembering that her like towels and washcloths matched her like wallpaper. And like, as I got older and like remember that memory, I always like, it didn't make any sense that I didn't end up living with this person. Because to me, if your towels and washcloth match, you got your shit together. Like, why can't you take care of me? Which is stupid, but it's what I believed for a long time. Anyway, but my mom told me that that was her sister, that was my aunt, that that I was staying with and her husband. And I just never warmed up to them. Like, I never talked to them ever. Like, the whole time I was there, I was like 3. And the only time I would ever say anything is when my mom would call, which I feel like is true, because I like bounced around from like foster homes and group homes, and there would be significant periods of time, like every time I would move to a different place, there would be a long time where I wouldn't say anything to anyone at all until I felt comfortable. And if I never felt comfortable, then I never did. And I was like, man, I've been like this. And so I thought that was interesting, that I've been like that since before I can even remember being like that. When my mom told me that, I was like, man, dang, that's like crazy, because that's like me. But anyway, as a result, I ended up going into foster care. I stayed in my first foster home, well, at least that I can remember, was with this lady named Ruth Palmer. She lived on Lower Pine Street in Princeton, West Virginia. And I know the street very well because that was a street that I lived on with my grandmother. She lived on Upper Pine Street. And there were like 4 or 5 other foster kids there. She was an older lady. Her son was a pastor. It was just like a cute little neighborhood. Like, all I can really remember was that there were a lot of kids in the neighborhood. I spent a lot of time on the playground. I remember I used to go up to my like grandma's house. Mind you, I don't really remember. I don't have like memories of my grandmother, but I do like remember her front yard, and I do remember like always going up the hill to her house when I stayed with Miss Palmer. And I also like, who was watching me then? Like, definitely was like 4, just like roaming this neighborhood. But it also was like the early 90s, and like everyone, like all the kids were always playing outside, so I don't think it was like that big of a deal. But I also find it hilarious because I know that I knew I wasn't supposed to be going up there, but I always would go up there by myself. And I think it's because it felt familiar to me. But Miss Palmer's house was not like a permanent placement for me. I think it was meant to be like transitional. I don't really know how long I stayed there because I was so young. It could be months, it could be years. It felt like it was years, but I don't know. I do know that, because I don't know how old I was when I got there. And I don't know how long I was like going to family members' houses before I was like technically like for real in foster care. But I know when I was 5, I moved to Keystone, West Virginia, and I stayed with a lady who is the only person I've ever called mom. I really love this lady. Like, I really feel like my formative years were in her house, and I really feel like my makeup is old and my hair looks like I'm a Republican candidate's wife trying to get the black vote. Like, definitely sleepy, but we doing this. Just keep it moving. Anyway, so I moved to Keystone, West Virginia, and I stayed with, I'm not going to say her name, but I stayed with the lady, the only person I've ever called my mom. And, you know, I feel like my formative years were there. I lived with her until I was, from 5 until I was 10. I feel like I became kind of who I was in her house. Like, I feel like a lot of who I am, just in general, has a lot to do with her being my mom for that period of time, me living in her house for that period of time, me experiencing her family and her and the way, you know, life was with her. I have a lot of great or good memories with living there, but also I have a lot of not so good memories living there. Like, I don't want to put her out there like that, but she definitely was abusive, and it wasn't something that, like, when I first got there, I was, you know, I was a kid who just got spankings for doing stupid stuff. Like, I would just get whooped for stuff you shouldn't get whooped for. Not that, first of all, I'm not a proponent of corporal punishment. Like, that's just not my jam. I'm not ever going to do that. Largely because I was a child who was abused. But Also because I just don't think it's an effective method to disciplining children. You know, I think the rod doesn't necessarily have to literally be a rod, but whatever. Uh, um, but at first it wasn't like, they weren't like beatings at first, and they weren't like beatings for things that didn't matter for real. It was like, you did something, you got in trouble, this is what it was. It wasn't unlike anyone else that was around me at the time. Like, you did something, you got whipped. That's what it was. Like, but the older I got and the bigger I got, the worse the whippings got. They turned from whippings to beatings for sure. And they started to become beatings for stuff that was stupid, that didn't make any sense. Like, there was like a lot. I would always get whooped for crying because I'm a Cancer, so like I'm definitely an emotional person. And, you know, I don't like to cry. Especially don't like people seeing me cry, but I'm a person that cries. Like, I can't even front on it. I'm a person who cries. And she like hated that I cried, and like I would get in trouble for that. I would get in trouble for being big because I was a big kid. I was dark skinned. I was knock-kneed. I was pigeon-toed. My butt was really big. My stomach was also big. I would get in trouble for not exercising. I would get whooped for not exercising. I definitely was like really into snack cakes. I definitely would get in trouble for that. I would get in trouble for just like everything. If she felt like I was telling her business, it was just a lot. And it definitely, you know, like progressed the older that I got. And by the time, like the last year that I was in her house, I just was getting like bigger as a person, and the beatings were getting worse as a result. And people could kind of tell that this was happening. Like, I would have to lie at school and tell people that I walked into a door or something crazy. And I remember the last night that I was at her house, I remember this like it was yesterday. I was watching the Grammys. My foster sister at the time, she had moved back home, and I definitely got on her nerves. Like, she was not a fan of me, and but I liked her. Like, she also is a big reason that I am the way that I am. I feel like a lot of my musical interests have a lot to do with being around her, but that's like neither here nor there. Anyway, so I always got in trouble for like eating with my mouth closed and smacking my food, and it definitely got on my foster sister's nerves. And I got in trouble, and I got whooped for smacking my food. But this was like a rare situation where my foster mom's like mom was there, and this was a lady that was like all about her mama. Like, don't get it twisted. Like, she was a mama's girl type of person, and she never ever came to our house. I feel like I can probably think of like maybe twice in the whole time that I lived there that she was there, but this particular night she was there. And because I got beat, I was crying, and I wouldn't stop crying, and my foster mom put me outside. Mind you, it's February. It's in the middle of cold country. It is cold. And at first I was crying, and then the longer I stayed out there, the louder I got when I was crying. And this town is kind of like it's a small town. It's like, yeah, like it was incorporated when I lived there, but it's not incorporated now. It's probably like 6 or 7 city blocks of a regular town. I mean, a regular city. It's a small city. And the police station was inside of the city hall, which was beside our house. And eventually a police officer came to the porch and was like, what is going on here? And I didn't really say anything, and he like took me to the city hall, and I was scared, and he took me inside of the like police station, and I didn't really say anything, but I eventually did, and I was taken from her house, and I was put in a child shelter like in the next town over. And I remember like when I got to the shelter, like they made me take my clothes off, and they took pictures of my body, and like, first I was a kid who watched a lot of TV. Like, really, if I didn't have TV, I don't really know what I would have done. I was definitely a kid who, like, when I got off of the bus from school, I had a system. I was watching this show, this show, this show, this show, up until it was time for me to go to bed. Like, I definitely wasn't playing with my TV time. It was really a way for me to escape my life for real, because I definitely like, I don't feel like it started there, but a part of me, like I created this duality in that at school I was like very vibrant and like funny. I was a class clown. I was super talkative. I was just, you know, I had the greatest time in school. Well, great enough time in school. But at home I was like, I didn't really talk to anyone. But like most of the time it was just me and my foster mom. And TV, and she would watch TV in her room and I would watch TV in my room. Anyway, I had really never seen like the pictures of my body with like all the bruises and the abrasions on my body. Like from the outside looking in, like I remember seeing those pictures and being like, man, like I was abused. But when I was like inside of it, it didn't really feel like that's what was happening. But like, and I wasn't supposed to see the pictures, but I did. And I remember like being very, like I was just concerned for myself. I was like, this is a whole lot. Anyway, so I was taken from that, you know, that foster home. And I don't really want to dwell like a whole lot on, I mean, that happened and that was like a part of my childhood and that was a part of my experience with living with this lady. But at the same time, I have a lot of love in my heart for her because, I mean, like she really, really, really is a very large part of the reason that I am who I am. If I didn't live with her for those 5 years, I don't think I would know what like home or family life is supposed to be like, or what holidays are, or what they mean, or what family time is, or how to cook, or anything. And more than anything, what she did for me that really saved me was she gave me the arts. Like she was a person who was like really devoted or dedicated to finding something that I was good at and like nurturing that and like making me pursue that in some way. And so I like wasn't good at athletics. I was like a fat kid. I didn't really care. I was smart, but I didn't really care about my academics like that. Like sometimes I wouldn't be on the honor roll and it wasn't like a thing to me. It was to her, though. I definitely got in trouble every time I wasn't on the honor roll. But she was like super devoted to finding something that I was good at. And she found out that I was good at the arts. Like, and it was through, also, I was super into church. Like, super duper into church. It was like a place that I felt safe. I went to Mount Chapel Baptist Church. What's up? Anyway, so like for like the Easter program, like a lot of churches, I was gonna say a lot of black churches, but yeah, a lot of black churches have like Easter plays and Easter speeches that like the youth do. Like I don't know if white churches do that, but black churches do for sure. And I remember like she was trying to make me learn my Easter speech. And I remember I read it a bunch of times and I like remembered it kind of quickly and I did it. And I remember like when it was done, she was like after church, she was like, you did a good job. And like, I was like, that was like a good thing. And then she would find other readings for me to learn. And eventually I started doing this poem. I learned this poem by James Weldon Johnson called The Creation. And I did it at my church and got like a good reaction. And as a result, I like did it at a bunch of other people's churches at their like church anniversaries. And mind you, the church I went to when I was a kid, we had anniversaries for everything. We had the usher board anniversary, the choir anniversary, the pastor's anniversary, the church anniversary. It was a lot of anniversary situations happening. Mind you, this is a rural town. Like, if something may happen in the church, really ain't nothing happening straight up. So yeah, that was like a thing. And so I did that at like a lot of church functions. I did it at colleges. I did it at like high school reunions. I was out there. And she just really, really, really pushed me to be in the arts. I was in plays, and it's really because she found the thing that I was good at and she really pursued it. I was in a movie. Well, it's kind of in a movie. I was an extra in this Richard Gere movie called Primal Fear, but they cut my scene. Well, my whole city scene, they reshot it in a different city. But I learned about Snapple that year and Danishes because craft service was popping. It was so weird. Like, you weren't allowed to like look at the talent. Like, if like I was an extra and it was like at my old elementary school, and like that's where they shot it. And I remember I had to be in this like parka in 90-degree weather, and you couldn't look at the actors, and you had to just like get on the bus and like play in the playground and like just be background. And so I can't say that I looked at Richard Gere because I was trying to keep my job, but I was on a movie set, and if they didn't cut my scenes, I would have been in a movie with Richard Gere, so she won. It's like, oh, my hair is garbage. What? That is really neither here nor there. What was I saying? Oh, like she just helped me find the arts, and the arts have really been the thing that have got me through my life in like really super hard times. So, you know, I know that abuse is not something you can excuse, and it's not something I'm willing to excuse, but it's also something that happened in my life. It happened to me, and it's up to me to decide how I feel about that. And I love her a lot. Like, I'm not in a relationship with her because it's not a healthy relationship, but like, I love her, and I very much owe a lot of my life to her. That's just not even in question. Also, she was a person who was super abused herself. That, I'm not making excuses. Well, maybe I am. Who knows? But she was definitely a person who was super abused by her spouse. And I don't think that she expected me to be the kind of kid that I was. And I don't think she'd really ever been in control of something that she could, like, you know, I mean, she had kids that she loved, and they were a lot older than me. Like, her youngest kid was graduating high school when I got there, and I was 5. But she was like, but I think she just loved her children too much to ever do anything like that to them. And I was like the first opportunity that she had to kind of control something, and I think that kind of had something to do with it. But I can't say for sure. I'm not going to go back and ask, but yeah, I don't, you know, that happened. But after I was taken from her house, I had like 10 placements in a year after I left her house, and kind of, I knew I was a foster kid growing up, but I didn't feel like a foster kid when I lived at her house. I felt like she was my mom, and that was it. And I feel like everybody else felt like that too. Like, I never, like, when I first got there, like, a social worker would call sometimes, but that kind of ceased super quickly. And so, like, the 5 years I was there, I didn't really have any interactions with the system or my social worker, even though I had one. And so I just didn't feel like I was in the system. But when I was taken from her house, like, things changed pretty quickly. Like, if I didn't feel like I was in the system before, I definitely was in the system. Because, like, that night I went and stayed in a children's shelter, and I stayed there for a period of time until I moved to Huntington, West Virginia, which is where I live now. And that was just, yeah, that's another pretty major point in my life. Like, if I hadn't moved to Huntington, that's another thing. I don't know where I would be or what my life would actually be like. But I moved to Huntington. I stayed with a young white family, which is crazy because I really didn't have interactions with that many white people. Like, even though I lived in West Virginia and I lived in Coal Town, this particular city was like very black. I had like some white kids that went to my school, and I had some white teachers, but for the most part, it was just a very black life I had. And it was super duper duper culture shock when I moved to Huntington, because not only was I living with a white family, I'd really only experienced like white people on TV and some white classmates. But like I was moving to a city, like a city. Like this was, when I tell you this place was rural, it was rural. Like to this day they don't have like cell phone service there. There's not an interstate road that goes there. You have to drive on a 2-lane road for like an hour and some change to get there. Like it is coal country. And so when I moved to Huntington, it was just like, whoa. Huntington is like very suburban, and it just looked like some shit you see on TV. And I like was kind of taken aback. Like I remember I got off on 5th Street Hill exit, which is like an exit in Huntington. And when you're coming down that hill, you can see the courthouse. We had like a gold dome on our courthouse. I remember being like, where am I even at? Yes. Like I was definitely super into Huntington from the moment I saw it. And I definitely had some behavioral problems in that foster home. It didn't work out. These people were young. They were like 27 years old. I was their first foster kid. They had a newborn. I think they were basically newlyweds. Like, they just were not equipped to have a kid like me, for real. And it didn't work out. And then I went to the Huntington Child Shelter, and I stayed there for a little bit. And the thing that really, like, I was just in love with Huntington just because it just seemed like something I'd seen on TV, and it was like, it seemed perfect, to be honest. I've lived here for years, and now I know that it is not perfect, but it's definitely a place that has my heart, and it got my heart from the moment I saw it. No, but like a good thing about moving to Huntington, I had like a lot of culture shock, because I definitely went from a place where it was like mainly black people to Huntington, which is not mainly black people. And I felt like super out of my element. Like there were like black kids who went to my school, but there wasn't like the majority of the kids who went to my school. It was like a predominantly white scenario. But my principal was black. Shout out to Miss Ward. Ugh. And meeting Miss Ward was like, it was just a godsend. It truly was. She had just adopted her 3 girls, and she had a daughter who was my age, whose name was Michelle. And I remember when I first met her, she told me that me and her daughter should switch names, because Michelle wanted to be called Michella, and my name is spelled Michella, and I wanted to be called Michelle. And she was like, you guys should just switch names, because you want to be a Michelle, and my Michelle wants to be a Michella. And I met her, and I felt like comfortable with her, but and she would like check on me and stuff. But when I moved to the shelter, she kind of like took a vested interest in me, and she like became a bigger part of my life. And she introduced me to her mom, who the real MVP, bro. She really is. I met her mom, and for whatever reason, her mom just like was interested in me, and I still don't know why. Like, she just was. And I remember the first thing she did for me, she made me a dress for, like, me and Michelle were graduating from 5th grade. She was graduating from Spring Hill. I was graduating from Johnston Elementary, which is now the Huntington Housing Authority. And I remember my dress was like this yellow and orange floral situation, and Michelle's straight up, Michelle's dress looked like a Christmas dress. It was like white, green, and red. But yeah, so she made our did I say Easter dresses? Our graduation dresses. And I remember she went to my graduation, and she brought me a flower, and we went to lunch afterwards, and we went to Midway, which is this hot dog place on the West End, which is right around the corner from Johnston. And after that, like, we were kind of inseparable. Like, school ended, and every day, because I was staying at the Huntington Child Shelter at the time, every day she would pick me up in the morning, and we would go to whatever, like we would just hang out all day, and she would bring me back like right before curfew, which was like at 9 or 10 at night. And she did that every day of that summer. And when I think about, like, I got really close to her, and Like, she made a lasting impact on my life. And but when I think about it, it wasn't that long. It was like, it couldn't have been more than 6 weeks of time. But she like wanted me, and I had never experienced anyone wanting me before or even since in my life. Like, just for no good reason, just because you're you and you exist and I love you. So yeah, like, that was my main thing. Like, she was my friend, my best friend. She was my granny. I called her granny. Anyway, we spent every day until school started together, until July 2nd of that year. That was her birthday, and the next day was my birthday. And she went to the shelter to pick me up on the 2nd, and they wouldn't let her take me, and I didn't know why. I remember I was tripping. And then a couple hours later, my social worker came, and I moved to a foster home and institute, which was destined to fail, because who the fuck even wants to do that? Like, I thought I found my thing, then all of a sudden I couldn't stay there. And the reason I couldn't stay there, which they didn't tell me initially, but it was because she was sick. She was going through dialysis at the time, like some of the times that like a couple of times a week. Like, she was the strongest lady. Like, she would take herself to dialysis and drive home, and I would sit with her at dialysis sometimes, and she was going through it, but anyway, I left on her birthday, and I didn't know why, and no one knew why. Like, Miss Ward told me after the fact that she didn't really know what happened. All she knew was just one day I was gone, and nobody would tell them anything, and that was like my family. Anyway, so that foster home that I went to after that just didn't work. And why would it? And then I don't know, I had 10 placements that year. So I like went to a shelter, and then I went to another shelter, and then I stayed with this lady in Hinton on the top of a mountain, which I don't really feel like that was supposed to be a placement. I think that was just to get me through the holidays. I had a really good social worker. Shout out to Linda! Linda, you definitely you keep asking me about my life, and I keep not answering the question because I'm a private person, but here we are. You're my friend on Facebook. Shout out to you. I had a really good social worker, Linda. She was the real MVP. And she was from, I think she still lives in Summers County, and her family like lived on that mountain, and she knew the lady at the top of the hill was a foster parent, and so I went there, I think really just to spend the holidays, because I remember I spent Thanksgiving and Christmas of that year there, and I spent a lot of time with my social worker. I remember when I was 10 years old, Linda put me in her like burgundy car and like tried to teach me how to drive in a stick shift on a mountain. That was crazy. I was definitely scared. But I also was kind of fearless. I don't know how to drive still, like to this day. But I remember doing that. That was interesting. Fun fact, so I drove for the first time when I was 10. When I was 20, my friend Celica was trying to teach me how to drive. I got super scared. We were like in this like parking lot that had like the edge of it was like this real steep hill, and I got really close to it, and I got super scared. I took my hands off the wheel and I covered my eyes, and Celica was like, yeah, we definitely could have died. You're not doing this again. But when I was 30, so every 10 years I'd be driving. Every time I see a Celica, which is randomly a lot, even though we don't live in the same city, she, like, ever since I turned 30, she's been like, making me get in her car and drive in parking lots, and it gives me the strongest anxiety. But I mean, she's right, I need to know how to drive, but I just don't want to. That's neither here nor there. I was so I was in Summers County for a bit, and then I moved to Daniels, West Virginia, and then I don't know, had a lot of placements that year, but I ended up at this group home called Davis Stewart when I was 11. And the thing that's odd about this is that you kind of have to be, I think like 13 or something, well, at the time, to be in a group home. I was like way too young to be in a group home, but there was like special permission for me to be there. And so I went there, and I stayed there for like 2.5, maybe 3 years. And I feel like, even though it was a group home, I feel like it was definitely the best decision to be made at that point, because like none of these foster homes were working out. You can't live in a children's shelter. And like if you're a child in state's custody, like your goal should be to be permanently placed somewhere. And shelters are just temporary housing scenarios until you find a foster home, or you're going to a group home, or it's a situation until you're placed wherever you're going to be placed for the foreseeable future, if not the future. Anyway, so I stayed at Davis Stewart. It's a group home there's like 6 cottages. It's a campus. There's like different levels. There's like level 1, level 2, level 3 houses. 3 girls' houses, 3 boys' houses. It was, I can't even front on it. Like, it wasn't like a terrible situation. I definitely learned how to do a lot of stuff when I was there, because you had to work to like get money to buy like your hygiene products and stuff, and just anything else you wanted. And so I know I can build a gazebo, I can landscape, I can mow grass, I can plaster, I can paint, I can clean gyms, I can plant flowers, I can chop wood, I can clean pools, I can, yeah, also, cool thing about that group home, there was a pool on campus. I'm a little water bug. Like, also because I was just so much younger than everyone else who was there, I definitely just spent every day of every summer like by myself in the pool. Like, other people were at the pool, but nobody was talking to me. I was definitely swimming by myself. Like, I swam so much, I got eczema. Like, I don't know if it was actually eczema, but I dried the F out of my skin. Like, yeah, it was a situation. But, it was a group home. It wasn't the worst thing, though, because, like, I did forge some relationships that kind of helped me. Like, because I was so young, some of the staff members there, like, really took me under their wing and, like, cared about me. And I had a therapist Karen! I'm sure Karen, who knows where Karen is, but Karen was, like, the bomb. And she was my therapist, and she was, like, the person that took me to, like, all of my court dates, or whenever I had to go to Princeton to meet with my social worker. She was, like, and she also was, like, my actual therapist at the group home. She was the bomb. So, yeah. I don't know, but I stayed there for a few years, and then I left and went to another group home, which doesn't make that much sense, but I did. And you kind of have to, like, the thing about group homes I don't think people understand is group homes really aren't situations, they're not orphanages. Fun fact though, David Stewart used to be an orphanage, and one of the staff members that worked there lived there when it was an orphanage, but it's not now, it's a group home. And group homes are basically like rehabilitative facilities for like mainly kids who have like caught some juvenile charge, like truancy, or they're incorrigible in some way, or they have like behavioral issues at home, and like a judge sends them to a group home, or a social worker, somebody sends them to a group home. And you're like there for like 6 or 9 months, maybe a year, until you get your like behavioral issues together, and you go back home to your house with your parents. Yeah, for like the most part, there weren't like a lot of kids. Not to say that there weren't kids that were like foster kids who didn't have families, but for the most part, it was kids with families who were in these group homes who had to go there for one reason or the other. And so yeah, like I lived in that group home, and I like during that time I was trying to be like, people were trying to place me in foster homes, and I would have like respite visits on the weekend, but like none of that ever worked out. Like I was not an easy kid to place, and like I did come close one time. Shout out to the Lewises. They all follow. We're all friends on Facebook and Instagram and stuff. Uh, that was awesome. But they ended up moving to North Carolina. They were an Army family, but they were the bomb. Like I would, Tia would braid my hair when I go there on the weekends. Like Miss Sherry would like cook down. They're like Mexican, and like Miss Sherry was Mexican and black. And she would just be making tostadas and just be in these streets. She has a potato soup that is like I fashion my potato soup after her potato soup. Like, secrets, not anymore. It's a thing I do. We play spades. It was the bomb. It was like super black and perfect. Like, yes. But yeah, but they moved to North Carolina, and I didn't end up staying there. I didn't end up staying with them, and then it just wasn't working out. Like all of the situations where I was trying to be placed, it wasn't a thing that was happening for me, which I wasn't tripping for real. Like I don't know why I wasn't tripping, but I just wasn't, because I straight up wanted to come back to Huntington. The end. And I kind of am a little obstinate in like, once I get my mind set on something, like that's it. That's what it is. I'm doing that. The end. And so like my heart and mind was in Huntington, and I just needed to be there. So after like all of these other home visits, because the thing about group homes, like these kids are trying to, like they're going to be placed back home, so part of the rehabilitation process is going home for home visits. And so when everyone went on home visits, after all my respite weekends were just not working, eventually I think my social worker was like, I give up. And so I started to go to Huntington, and I ended up staying with Miss Ward on the weekends, who was my principal, who also was a foster parent because she had to be one to adopt her kids. And so she was like legal. I was legally able to stay with her, and as a result, I got to see my granny, and things were Gucci for the most part for me. And after I left that group home, I moved to another group home in Morgantown called Odyssey House, which was Odyssey House was something else, bro. Like straight up, like we just did whatever we wanted to do with this group home. Like really, like it was in Morgantown. All of our staff were college kids. We could smoke. Oh yeah, I started smoking when I was at David Stewart, because like all the kids there smoked. Not that you're allowed to smoke, like you definitely got in trouble for smoking, but I definitely started smoking when I was like 12. Still smoke to this day. Jesus, please be with me. But like, definitely, like, we had smoke breaks at this group home. I like drank alcohol for the first time on the roof of this house. Like some dude across the street, I think his name was Ben, bought us some Mad Dog 2020 and got us drunk on the like roof of this porch of this group home. I remember like going to school the next day being drunk still. It was a weird situation, and it was gross. Like Mad Dog 2020 is garbaggio. It's nasty. But when you're young and you're drinking for the first time, I guess that's what you're doing. I was definitely like 14. Buying my Newport mediums. There was a store downtown, Morgantown, which is basically floorball. Okay, just super serious side note. I literally have a strong distaste for the way that city is set up. Like I hate Morgantown. I don't care what anyone says. Like you can fight me. I don't care. It doesn't make that much sense. It's a city built on a bunch of hills with a river running through it. It's like burrowed. It's like you're in traffic literally all the time for no good reason. It is just a strange city. But yeah, there was like some place downtown that like knew we were in this group home would sell us cigarettes, and so I would buy Newport mediums every Friday when I got my chore money. Got my money from doing my chores, and I would buy my cigarettes every week. What kind of life was I living? Also, I didn't go to school ever. Like, you're supposed to go to school. Definitely never did. And I had to repeat the 9th grade because I never went to school. I mean, I went to school, but I just skipped like a whole lot. Like, I would leave in the morning and go to school, but I would like get out of the car and they would leave, and then I just would never walk into school. So, yeah, I was basically in those streets when I lived in that group home, like, a lot. I don't know how that place is still open. I mean, I feel like maybe things have had to change, because, my God, I did whatever I wanted to do there, and it was literally everybody. So yeah. But because I really had just like made it very clear that Huntington was like literally the only thing that was going to happen for me in terms of if you're trying to place me somewhere, I don't care about anything other than Huntington. Let's make Huntington happen, or just don't talk to me about anything else because I don't care. And so eventually I found a foster home. The shelter I was in, I mean the group home I was in was a Presley Ridge group home. It's called Odyssey House. And they also have like specialized foster care. And so there was a Presley Ridge foster parent, Miss Felder. Shout out to Miss Felder. I went to live with her. And the summer that I was transitioning from Odyssey House to Miss Felder's house, my granny got sick. Mind you, the reason I want to even live in Huntington in the first place is because she lives there. And that's where my family is, or the family that wants me at the very least, is there. But she started to get sick that summer, and it kind of like progressed kind of rapidly. And I basically was just like pretending like she wasn't dying. And I was like just avoiding her at all costs. Like I would not go and see her in the hospital. I never did. And I remember the last thing she asked me to do, me and my cousin Michelle, not my real cousin, Miss Ward's daughter, but we call each other cousins. She asked me and Michelle to, because me and Michelle were kind of inseparable. Like when I came to Huntington on the weekends, like we were a duo. She asked me and Michelle to plant some flowers in her flower bed, and we definitely didn't do what we were supposed to do. Like we definitely took some tablespoons and like dug these shallow holes and put these plants in there and like haphazardly covered it in the dirt and mulch, and went and hung out with some dude Michelle was talking to in Orchard Court. And that's the last time I saw my granny, and I didn't even do the thing that she said she asked us to do. It's like wouldn't even have been hard to actually plant these flowers the right way. Like, come on now. But like I said, she at that point she had been going in and out of the hospital. But after the last time I had seen her at her house, she went to the hospital and she never came out. And she was in the hospital for a little bit, and I was in Huntington a lot because it was the summertime and I was transitioning from Miss Felder's house, from Odyssey House to Miss Felder's foster home, and which was in Huntington. And so it wasn't like I didn't have any opportunity to see her. I had like all of the opportunities to go to the hospital. I just didn't. And then I remember the night before I was moving to Huntington, I had a visit that weekend in Huntington, and then I went back to Morgantown. That morning I had to go to court in Princeton, and then I was moving all my stuff to Huntington after court. And it was the middle of the night, and at this point she couldn't talk, but she could hear you. And I called the hospital, and I had my aunt put the phone to her ear, and I remember I told her that I loved her, and like I was sorry that I didn't go and see her. And you know, then I went to court the next day. I moved from Morgantown, went to Princeton, then I went to Huntington. And I remember I called my aunt's house, and my cousin Mary answered the phone, and I was like, how is Granny doing? And she was like, Granny died. So, yeah. I've been fighting really hard to move to Huntington to be with her. And the day I move back, she dies. So, yep. That happened. Um, that was just a tough time. Like, it was whatever. It happened. And then, I remember that summer I rededicated my life to Christ. And yeah, I started living with Miss Felder. I wasn't a good kid. Like, it wasn't like I was in these streets or doing anything crazy. Like, I definitely was a square. But, I didn't do anything she told me to do. Like, I just didn't even care. And, which is weird because I, like, super into church. Like, I, like, definitely spent, like, if I wasn't in school, I was definitely at church. Or watching TV. Like, what I did. I was definitely obsessed with television, like, my whole life. But I definitely was obsessed with not listening to Miss Felder, too. Like, I just did not care about anything she told me to do. And I really regret that. Because Miss Felder was a really good... I think she's still a foster parent to this day. Like, she's, like, one of the better foster parents I've ever had in my life. And she's, like, really devoted her life to foster care. And she really deserves, like, everything. Like, she's the bomb. She's lost a lot of her foster kids, too. Like at least 2 of her foster kids have died. And, like, she's just endured. I don't know how. She just is, like a real trooper. So shout out to Miss Felder. But because I just didn't listen to her and do what she told me to do, and I stayed there for a year, but when school was out, I ended up living in another group home in Ona, West Virginia, which is close to Huntington. It's in the same county. And I continued to go to Huntington High. I stayed there for about 6 months, but I didn't really need to be there because it was like a super strict, like, it was for kids who had like serious behavioral problems, and I just was like emotional and defiant. It wasn't like, and I didn't really have troubles in group homes. Like, the troubles I had in foster homes were not the type of troubles I had in group homes. Randomly, I don't want to say I prefer a system, but I like a system. You know, like, I don't like the system, like the system, but I like a system. Like, things that make sense. And families don't make that much sense to me. But systems do. So, I really didn't have, like behavioral issues in group homes. I was, like, stellar in a group home, straight up. And, like quickly being there, people were like, why is she even here? Because it was, like, a very strict group home. It was, like, one of those, literally every second of your day was, like, mapped out. Like, we would spend Saturday or Sunday, whatever, someday on the weekend, like, planning. We would write on this big, like, piece of paper or whatever, everything we were doing from the moment we woke up to the moment we went to sleep every day that week. And before everything, we'd have to do this thing called huddles. And so you'd have to, like, huddle when you woke up in the morning, set expectations for, like, brushing your teeth and your hair. After that's done, and set a time frame to do it. And after that's done, you'd huddle to see if you met those expectations. You'd set expectations for breakfast. And then after breakfast, you'd have a huddle, see if you met those expectations. You set an expectation for cleanup. It was like a huddle. It was a thing. Huddle to walk to dinner, breakfast, back from breakfast, before, whatever. It was a thing. So, yeah. It was like a super strict thing, and I didn't really need to be there. And I wasn't there for that long. I was there for like 6 months, and I got to go to Huntington High, which was great because I had been there the year before, and I like met some friends, and I was feeling comfortable in the school. I started to get involved in plays, and that was really my saving grace, because once school started, like, I didn't really adhere to, like, on the weekends, I would have to do huddles and be like a part of the program, but for the most part, I didn't go to the school because the kids that went to school there went to Cabell Midland, because Cabell Midland is basically right beside this group home, which is the other high school in my county. But I was a black kid, and there weren't that many black kids that went to Midland, and they were like anticipating like race issues, so they let me keep going to Huntington High. Also, anybody trying to go to Midland like at all? So shout out to the fact that I got to go to Huntington High. And because of that, I didn't really, like, once school started, I didn't really feel like I was in that group home for real. And I was eventually placed in another foster home in Huntington. I stayed there for 6 months, and then I went to another group home in Cerrito that I stayed for like a couple of years until I got an apartment, kind of, like, man. So all throughout this time, like, I've lived in a bunch of different places, but Huntington High was like high school for me was, like, up until that point, like, some of, like, the best experience of my life. Like, I felt really comfortable there. I was really popular in high school. I knew everyone knew me. I was super involved in everything. Like I was in like every club. I did everything. My senior year, I was the manager of my football team. I also love football. I was like all about school spirit. I was like crazy talkative. I was funny. I was class clown. I was on the homecoming court. Like, I was about Huntington High. Like, don't get the game twisted. Like, I bled green and gold. I probably still do. And it really was because that was like my only constant. Like, I lived a bunch of places while I was in high school, and Huntington High was a thing that really kept me, and like being in plays allowed me to like live a normal life while not having a normal life. And the thing that the main reason that I'm really doing this video is because I've really let this, I mean, this has been a thing that's followed me my whole life in terms of like being ashamed of like the truth of my life. And I was definitely like very ashamed. Like, no one knew what my life really was when I was in high school, which is weird because everybody knew me, but nobody knew that I was in a group home or in group homes and foster homes and like dealing with any of the stuff that I was dealing with at all. And I don't know, I just have been able to live my life in this way where like things should be basically terrible where I live, and whenever I'm in the world, I'm out here. And so that's definitely what I did in high school. Yeah, I was definitely like super into church, super into school. Like, if I wasn't at school, I was definitely at church. I was like crazy about God when I was in high school. I was like a soldier for Christ. Like, don't get it twisted. I was definitely like reading my Bible in class. I prayed about everything. Tests, prom dresses, starbursts. Like, it was nothing I didn't talk to God about. I was like really about God. I was like leading like the prayer circle at the beginning of school. Like, it was like Jesus was my jam. Like, don't get it twisted. I mean, is my jam still, but definitely wasn't my jam at that time. And so I lived in this group home in Cerrito. I just had a randomly normal life though. I went to football games. I traveled with the football team. I went to basketball games. I was in plays. Like, I had a bunch of extracurriculars. Probably because I just didn't want to be at the group home, if we being completely honest. But also because I just really like wholeheartedly enjoyed everything about high school. So that was the thing I did. And but I remember when I turned 18. I was senior in high school. Oh, because I had to repeat the 9th grade. Like, no one knew that I had to repeat the 9th grade. One, super ashamed. Secondly, I was a lot younger than everyone else in my class before. And when I had to repeat the 9th grade and start high school all over again, it really didn't matter because everyone was my age at that point. Like, I was the same age as everyone I was in a class with. And before, I was younger than everyone else. So it kind of worked out that way. But I remember when I turned 18, I was going into my senior year of high school, and I don't really know what I thought was going to happen, but I was like confident that something would, like, some miracle would happen in my life, and like I wouldn't have to sign myself back into state's custody, and I wouldn't have to live in this group home. And I was like believing God that that was like what was going to happen for me. And the day I turned 18 and nothing did happen, I'm telling you the truth. I have never been devastated like that in my life. Like, I cried from the, that was my birthday too, because you turn 18 on your birthday. I woke up that morning and realized nothing was going to change, and I cried from morning to night straight. Like, I definitely cried that hard since then, but before that, I'm a crier, but I had never cried like that. Like, I cried so much that my eyelids were swollen. Like, I was devastated. Like, and at that point, I kind of didn't, I don't want to say I stopped being a soldier for Christ, because that's just not true, but I definitely lost a lot of faith that day. Like, I didn't understand, mind you, what was actually going to happen, like, for real. But I believed something miraculous was going to happen, and I wouldn't have to be in the group home. But I definitely did. Definitely had to sign myself back into state's custody, just because where would I go if I didn't? And so I did that, and then I remained in state's custody for a part of that year, and I stayed in that group home, and then I was like, I actually hate all of y'all, and I don't want to do this anymore. And so I left the group home, and I went and stayed with a foster family that I had stayed with before, but they, I mean, technically weren't my foster parents because I wasn't in state's custody anymore. They just let me stay there, but I couldn't continue to stay there because I wasn't a foster kid. And so I eventually signed myself back into state's custody. I went back to that group home in Cerrito, which isn't a bad group home. Like, I'm not even saying that. It just was not for me like that. There were definitely good people there. I definitely got some good stuff out of that scenario, but it just was like the last place I wanted to be, especially at the time. But I signed myself back into state's custody so I could eventually get an apartment, which I did, like, probably a month later. And I finished high school in my own apartment that I did through this, there's this program called the Chafee Grant that is for independent living for people who are aging out of the system, which was what was happening to me. So, yeah, so I finished high school in my own apartment, and then I went to Marshall. And that's like one of the things about being in the Chafee program. You have to either work or go to school, and I went to school. And that was like my thing. But when I got in that apartment, I became like really, really super depressed. Like, once high school ended, I had like I just never knew that I was alone. Like, it didn't make any, like, it's weird to me when I think about it, because obviously I was alone. I didn't have, like, I was in group homes and foster homes, and every time I moved, I was the only person that was moving. It was me. But it wasn't until, like, high school was over and everything had kind of died down, because even though I was in group homes and stuff, like, something was always happening. A lot of stuff I didn't want to happen, but always something. But I was like in my own stillness in my own apartment. I realized I didn't really have anyone to like depend on or to call if I needed something. I was like untethered to anyone, and that was super depressing. Like, that was devastating to realize. And yeah, like, I definitely didn't care about a whole lot during that time. I was super depressed. I definitely barely left my house. I definitely barely cleaned my house. I was basically a hoarder. Like, I was just like super depressed and felt very alone in the world. And I definitely didn't go to school. I ended up getting kicked out of the program because you have to stay in school and maintain grades to be in school, and I definitely wasn't doing that. And so I got kicked out of the program, and yeah, I got evicted kind of immediately. Not immediately, but like probably a month or so. I went to another apartment, and then I definitely got evicted from there, and then that was my first time being homeless. And that was a tough time. I stayed at the Huntington City Mission, and I was homeless. Like, I had met a group of girls though, which, saving grace, truly. Like, we had a lot of personality clashes and situations, but you know, this group of girls definitely kept me afloat during that time because, like, I stayed at the mission for a bit, but after a certain while, if you don't like have things going, which I didn't because I didn't have any direction, I wasn't doing anything for real. I couldn't even find a job. I didn't even know how to have a job. I only had one job. I worked at a grocery store for like 2 weeks. Like, I'd never worked. I'd never done anything. And so I was just lost in this world. I had no direction, and I was really ashamed of being homeless. I felt like everyone knew me, and I felt like I looked homeless. I didn't want to. It just was a lot. And like, after a while, you couldn't stay at the mission, so I would like stay with my friends, and that wasn't always a sure thing. And so sometimes I would sleep on the street, and that was a tough time. And I was homeless for like almost a year, and it was like really, I felt like it was never going to get any better, and obviously I hated it because it's homelessness, and I tried to kill myself. I took 200 aspirin. I sat on the steps of the old Huntington High, and I ate all of them. And I sat there for a little bit. Then I got really scared. And I called my friend Celica. She took me to the hospital. And I had charcoal. I had to go on dialysis because I definitely fucked my kidneys up. Yeah, it was, and then I mean, I was still homeless, so that happened until I wasn't. I got into school, and I got an apartment, and I got a little job, and whatever, but that didn't last either, because I wasn't really focused, and got evicted again, and I tried to kill myself again. That time, though, I just didn't die like I should have, but I didn't. After a while of being on it and not dying, I was concerned that maybe I would go crazy, because the thing about taking like a lot of pills, it kind of alters your brain in a way that you're basically high. And after being on those pills for so long and not dying, I was concerned that I would always be high. And so I called 911 for myself, and I went to the hospital by myself, and yeah, in the hospital. Still homeless. And then eventually, after all that happened, I didn't have any identification because I had been evicted and lost all of my stuff so many times. I didn't have like anything to prove who I was, and you need that to get anything. And so I didn't want to be homeless in Huntington anymore. I felt like it was very demoralizing, and so I moved to Columbus because I didn't care about being homeless in a city where nobody knew me, and it's a better city. No, That's not true. It's a different city. Uh, and so I moved to Columbus. My friend Candace drove me. Moved there with like $200 for some job I'd had and a bag, a trash bag full of clothes, and I went and stayed at Faith Mission, which is a shelter on Long Street in Columbus. And I stayed there for like 9 months. It was like a hard time because it wasn't, okay, I don't want to say it was a hard time because it definitely wasn't. I didn't care about, it was tough because I was in a shelter. Like, homelessness is not the jam. But it wasn't like the worst experience. It was in a city. I had like access to things and like I stayed there until I got my birth certificate, which took a long time. Who knew that if you don't know your mother or anyone in your family or anybody can confirm that you were actually born, it's kind of super hard to get your birth certificate in New Jersey. Yeah, it took a crazy long time. Like I didn't get it until like May of the next year. I moved there in November. I remember when I moved to Columbus, I remember getting out of the car and it was just like significantly colder than it was in Huntington. I remember I went and bought like a really thick sweatshirt and wore it as my coat that year. And I bought some weird patent leather, like black snow boots that went like to my knees. And I bought some latch hooks from a beauty supply store, and I wore the F out of these latch hooks. Like I would, because I was just trying to find like cost-effective ways to not look crazy, or at least have my hair done. Which latch hooks don't. I don't know why I did that, but I did. They were red and black. I wore the junks out. Yeah, because I definitely would take them out, wash them, wash my hair, braid my hair back up, and put them back in. Yeah, that's kind of neither here nor there. But yeah, so I got my birth certificate probably May of the next year, and I was housed. I stayed in this like old people high rise called the Bryden House, which is strange, but I lived there. It was public housing. It was close to Bexley, and I mean it was a weird situation for sure. Like also a lot of people in that high rise like definitely addicted to drugs. Like it was like felt like a crack house, not gonna lie, but it's also where I live. I have a lot of like good memories about being there because most of the time I spent in that apartment was by myself, and I was not like concerned about what was happening outside of it. So it didn't really feel like that big of a deal to me. But Columbus was it was like a really interesting time because first of all, I moved there with nothing. I didn't have any discernible skills. The only thing that, I'm definitely leaving a lot of stuff out. The only thing I could do was poetry. I, at that point, had started writing poetry in high school with my friend Janine. What's up, Janine? We started this poetry group called NWP, Niggas with Poetry, and we started like competing for each other's like lunch money, and as a result I just continued to write poetry, and so did Janine. But yeah, so like by the time I got to Columbus, I had, you know, been doing open mics, in like Huntington is a college town, so like on the little college scene in Huntington, and you know, I just liked writing poetry. And to be honest, if it had been 2016 and not like 2005 or 6, I probably would have just tried to make like a mixtape, because like my poetry is very like, this definitely has a cadence, it's definitely rhymey, it's definitely I mean, it's evolved into actual poetry, but I just wanted to be a rapper, probably. Not even a question. So, uh, but that was like the only thing that I knew that I could do for real. And so I started doing poetry. I remember I think I went to writer's block the first night. Well, not the, I think that was the first poetry thing I went to was writer's block, which is ran by Scott Woods. What's up, Scott? First of all, y'all need to follow Scott Woods on Facebook. It will literally change your life. Like, I don't know how a person can be so good at Facebook, but he is. But yeah, shout out to Scott. Well, I think I went to his night first, and then I think I didn't go to anything for a while. But I remember the first poetry event of the new year, I think it was 2008 or 9, for a new venue called Righting Wrongs, which I didn't know was a new thing, but I Googled poetry and it was like literally on the same street as the shelter that I was in, and the staff there were like super cool with me for some reason, and they like let me stay later than curfew to go to this poetry thing. I think somebody had asked me to like share a poem, and I did, and they were like, yeah girl, go do you, you got this. And so that was great. And so I went to Righting Wrongs. I didn't know that it was his first night, but that was the first night that Righting Wrongs was Righting Wrongs, because it used to be a poetry night called I think Black Pearl Poetry, and it's ran by Will Evans, who is something like a legend in the poetry community. And my homegirl, well, at the time it was him and Alex's night, and they've since moved on, but at the time it was their night. And I remember I walked in and Alex asked me if I wanted to slam, and I was like, girl, I don't know what slam is, but yeah. And so, and slam essentially is competitive poetry, and they were slamming for, I think, IWIPs or nationals, who knows, I don't know. It was for like a slam event, like a national slam event, because you have to do like, there's like a season where you slam, and then you do a grand finale if you get enough points, whatever. So I slammed, and I did 2 poems, and I got all 10s on both rounds, and I won that slam. I had never slammed before, and I was like, I'm out here, look at me, I'm in these streets. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't even understand what slam was for. I definitely didn't understand that I was like slamming to try to be a part of a team or something. But that's like how it started for me. Like, Righting Wrongs is definitely, like, I became like a poet because of Righting Wrongs. Like, I definitely did poetry before, but I don't think I can necessarily call myself a poet. But because of Righting Wrongs, like, 100% like went into that world and kind of stayed until I left the city of Columbus. And things kind of, you know, because I couldn't really do anything. I didn't have a job. I was super poor. Like, even after I was placed, I never had a dime. I never had a phone. I never had anything. And I would always go to like slams for money, like where you could win, like you could compete to win money. And a cool thing that Columbus does, they have like festivals in the summertime, like damn near every weekend, and a lot of them have like a poetry slam competition where you can win money. And so I would go and slam and get my little coins, and I never won any like grand slams for national teams or situations, and then I just stopped slamming for national stuff because I just didn't have a heart for it. Like, it wasn't my thing. But I was slamming for other stuff, and I definitely was like in the city. And one of the like best things that kind of ever happened to me when I was in Columbus, there was a slam to perform with Malcolm Jamal Warner, who, he's an actor, but he's also like a pretty, like, he's a poet, and he's like a Grammy award winning artist. Like, he's in these streets, he does like jazz and stuff, and he does poetry, like, for real, like, straight up. Like, Theo from The Cosby Show does poetry, and he kills it. So And he was doing an event at the King Arts Center in Columbus, which was like this big historical venue in like the Near East part of Columbus. It's close to downtown. Anyway, I slammed. I got in the show to perform with him, and I think it was me, my girl Izetta, Stu Wally, Barb, and this girl Kyla. And when the show happened, it was so great. It was like one of the best moments ever. I remember my friends from Huntington came. So at this point, Celica had randomly moved to Columbus, and we had super randomly connected. Like I was walking down the street, and she was in a park, and we weren't really on speaking terms at that time. Like, I talk about that a little bit, and Celica and I have a podcast now together that we don't update frequently enough for anyone to care about, but we definitely have a podcast, and we talk about like our journey as friends, but at this point we weren't friends, and I knew she'd moved to Columbus, but we weren't talking, so it wasn't like I was looking for her, but God was trying to place us in the same place. So at that point I had reconnected with Celica randomly on a street in Columbus after not being on speaking terms with her, and she'd been in Puerto Rico for a year. It was interesting. Anyway, but Celica was already in Columbus. My friend Prince came. I invited my friend Heather and my friend Dominique, and it was like a big thing. Like, I did the show. Malcolm Jamal Warner called me back for an encore. I will put the link to the video to that in this description box. However, I look a mess, but I did really well, and I kind of killed it. And as a result of that show, I kind of like was in them streets. Like, I did like 2 other things at the King Arts Center that didn't have anything to do with this. Just like somebody like asked me to participate in these things, and then people would ask me to come like do shows for them. And I started to like open mic at like all of the venues in Columbus, and like I was just on the scene. But also I was just still super poor during this time. Like, I was going out and performing, and like I was always at Righting Wrongs because Alex is the real MVP. Alex is still my friend to this day. Every time I go to Columbus, I stay with her. But Alex was one of like few people that like knew what my story was for real, and like what my life actually was, and she like wouldn't make me pay to go to Righting Wrongs, and so that was my mainstay. Like, I could be as poor as I actually was and continue to perform, and so yeah, so shout out to Alex for that, because I mean, just shout out to Righting Wrongs. Like, I was able to really become a poet and really like do something that I was good at and I love to do on a large enough stage. Like, that was, Columbus is one of the premier cities for spoken word poetry. I didn't know that when I moved there, but there's so many nights in Columbus. The like president of the National Poetry Slam for years was Scott Woods. Like, Scott Woods is writer's block. God, I love Scott Woods. You know, I mean, I'm definitely a Righting Wrongs person. Like, don't get it twisted, but like, Scott Woods is like my favorite poet. It's just, he just is. He's just like, might be my favorite person too. He's just so, he's the best. He's like literally the bomb. Like, you should check out Scott Woods. Like, look for his book, buy his book, look for him on the internet. He's killing it on the internet. Look for his performance pieces. He's all over YouTube. Like, he is the dude. Like, Scott Woods, yeah, he's definitely a legend. And he's definitely like amazing. He also has a podcast where he talks about race. He's just like the best in the world. I digress though. I forgot what I was even talking about. I think shout out to Righting Wrongs. Shout out to poetry. Shout out to, oh yeah, I was definitely super poor. I didn't have anything. Like, I didn't have a phone most of the time. I was just out there, and during that time I really had like a transformative like spiritual experience though, that I really feel like the whole point of me even being in Columbus was for that. And so I um I was like angry with God. And I wasn't really saying that, but I was. And I kind of spent like 6 months where I didn't speak to anyone. Like I would go to righting wrongs and I would do poetry, but I wouldn't do anything else. I wouldn't talk to anyone else. Um, oh, at the time though, I think it's important to say I had a blog that I wrote on every day. I would walk to the library every day because I didn't have a phone. And yeah, so I would just blog. I would go to the library and blog. I don't really know if that's like super important information, but I definitely did that for a long time. I think it kind of is though, because some of the stuff that I do today, I know how to do very much so because I spent all that time blogging. I love to blog. I definitely blog about stupid stuff. It's not like a major thing, but I definitely got to meet cool people as a result. I'm still like friends with a lot of these people that I connected with. Because during that time, like, blogging was a thing. Like, everybody and their mom was blogging. And so, yeah, I definitely have like internet friends because of blogging. So shout out to them. You ever have lipstick on your mouth for too long and it just like cakes in a way that stresses you out? It's happening to me right now. Anyway, I have to think about where I was going with this. So yeah, I blogged. I don't really feel like it, I don't really know if it's that important to my journey, like my life, but it's the thing I did. It was the thing I did mostly when I was in Columbus because I didn't have anything else to do, and it really kept me connected to the world and what was really going on, and it was important to me. And it gave me something to do, and it really connected me with people that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And so shout out to blogging. But during that time I really had seriously like spiritual situation happen when I lived in Columbus. Like I spent a period of time where I didn't really talk to anyone for a long period of time. Like I said, I would go to righting wrongs, and that was about it in terms of all of my social interactions. And in the midst of this 6-month period, I spent a lot of time like praying and reading my Bible. Man, the Gospel of John, dog, like straight up. That is like, if ever you really want to know what the bleeding real love of God is, start there, because that is, you know, anytime I feel like I need, like I'm out of line or like need to feel like I'm loved in this world by God, I like read the book of John. Definitely checks you real quick. Like it's the one. Anyway, but I was dealing with like anger towards God that I hadn't expressed. And I didn't really feel like you could say that you were mad at God. And so I felt like weird about, I like had this like suppressed anger. And one day I just licked one off on God. Like I basically cussed him out in my kitchen. And I was like, I just don't know why you got me out here like this. Like this doesn't make any sense. I don't feel like any of this is gonna ever get any better. Don't have anyone that I can rely on or like help me in any significant of enough of a manner to help me progress in this world. And I don't know, I was dealing with a lot of resentment because like I never really had any friends who were going through anything close to what I was going through. And so I dealt with a lot of resentment in that, you know, it's not like I'm a perfect person. It's not like I made all of the right decisions, because I definitely didn't. But it was really starting to get to me that like everyone I knew was making similar mistakes to what I was making, or was on their way to making mistakes like I was making. But like the consequences weren't nearly as severe. and they were able to bounce back. But like when I made a mistake, I would hit bottom, and that was really getting on my nerves. Uh, and I felt like there was like, you can't win for losing. That's what I felt like, and so I was just like, I don't know why you do me like this, but I don't really know how I feel about you, God. Like, straight up, like I don't like you, and I don't understand you, and I wish you were like part of the way on my team because I definitely need someone to be. And I don't know. I said all of that. I slick one off, and then after I got it all out, because it was more than what I said, I was tripping. I was going off, and like I was like, anger is cleansing. Like I don't know if y'all know that or like people know that, but like I don't even know if I acknowledge it that much. But like when you get to yell on somebody or just yell, that's lightweight the truth right there, because it really does cleanse you of, like, it's a real emotion that really cleanses your spirit. Like I'm not trying to say that anger is a thing that people should live in, because I definitely don't believe that, but I do think that it's purposeful, truly. Anyway, after that I was like able to just like get it all out and like just look at my life from a fresh perspective. And after I said all of that, I wasn't really stressed about having answers about what I had gone through in my life up until that point. I think I just needed to get that out and really express to God that like, oh, what we out here doing for real? Like, please help me. And I realized that, and I continued to do this, so it wasn't like it was transformative in a way that like changed me forever, but it changed me in that moment to where, like, I know this about myself, and I definitely was doing it at this time. Like, I was just shutting people out because I was ashamed of my life and my story, and I would just keep people like this. It wasn't like people didn't invite me to do things. It wasn't like people weren't interested in being friends with me, because they definitely were, but I was not interested in taking anyone up on their offers to hang out or hang out with anyone. I just wanted to live my life and not have anyone interfere. Or I was really afraid of judgment, because I had experienced a lot of judgment from people that I knew, who knew my situation and hadn't really helped me in a way that I thought you should, and help people. And I definitely felt like people, you know, this is America, so being poor is like one of the worst things you can be. And I like personally myself felt a way about being poor, and then I 100% felt a way about how I was being treated by people who did know that I was going through stuff like this. And so I kind of got to a place where it was like, I'm definitely not doing that again. Like, and so I just tried to keep things to myself as a way to kind of just get through it. But it definitely kept me alone. And so after I did that, I don't know how I had a phone, but at some point I know I called my godmom. Shout out to Cherie. And I don't know what I was talking to her about, but she said something to me like, seize every opportunity. And I feel like it was that same day. I don't know. It was in the same time period. And it's not like I hadn't heard that before, but it resonated with me that day in particular. And I like made a promise to myself and to God that if anybody asked me to do anything, I would say yes, no matter if I could afford to do it or not. If not, I could just be honest and say I can't do it for this reason. Just like, don't just get caught up in some weird stuff just because you're poor. Just be open to people who are trying to be open to you. So I went to a poetry event that night, and I did some poetry, and this girl came up to me, and her name was Nessara. What's up? She was like, hey, I really like your poetry. Like, do you want to hang out with me and my girls? We're going to go smoke shisha, which is hookah. Um, and I was like, yeah, I'll do that, because I just made this promise with God that same day that I would say yes to anybody who asked me to do something, no matter what. And when I didn't really think that she meant like that moment, but she definitely did. She was like, well, we're parked outside. If you want to ride with us, you certainly can. And I was like, okay, yeah, all right, I guess I'm doing this. And Nessa's Somali, and all of the girls that were with her that night are Somali, and like everyone that they hang out with are Somali, and I go to Gypsies. Listen, if you're from Columbus, or you live in Columbus, or you used to live in Columbus, you know about Gypsies, bro. Like, that's where it's at. If you smoke a hookah in Columbus, or in Ohio, just in general, Gypsies is where it's at. Don't trip. So we go to Gypsies. I'm sitting in the back of Gypsies with 4 girls that I just met, and like 8 or 10 other people that I don't know at all Somali people. I had never really been around anyone who is, okay, that's not true. I had never really been in the element of someone who wasn't from my culture. Like, I definitely been around people in my life and in school that shared a different culture than me and a different religion and everything. But I had never really been inside of their element. And so I definitely was inside of their element. And I just spent all night like asking questions about their culture and their country and their religion, and they just like talked to me all night about this, and we smoked shisha, and it was the bomb. And then Nessa, she communicated with me on Facebook, because I just don't know what my life was. Like, I know I talked to Cherie that week, but I don't know how. I clearly didn't have a phone, because Nessa had to contact me on Facebook, and I'd hung out with them that night, but I hadn't really heard from them since then. And a few days later, she contacted me on Facebook and was like, I know it feels like I kind of went ghost, but Ramadan just started, and I'm not really allowed to have like worldly conversation during the day, but I want to invite you to break fast. And I was like, don't know what breaking fast is, but I'm on this journey where I'm saying yes, so yes. And so I went, and we went to my friend Amrin's house. Amrin and Saduk, their sisters. We went to their house, and I think it was just me, Nessa, Amrin, Saduk. I feel like Muna maybe had been there, but I don't know for real. Anyway, so we had like, I had chai for the, like, not this like chai you get in the tea bag. I'm talking about like they put all of the herbs in the teapot. Like, it wasn't even a teapot. It was like a pot with the sugar cooked in it and like black tea leaves. It was just the bomb. And I drank it black. I don't really like chai lattes. Like, people like chai tea with milk. Not me, bro. I like chai tea. Straight up. And it's because I tried it for the first time there. And then we had sambusas, I think, and Ethiopian food, and we prayed. And what was so cool about this was that, because obviously I was like in someone's home, and like when it's prayer time, like you need to do prayer time. But like, I was like, here's the thing, I'm definitely Christian. I don't know Arabic. Like, I just want you guys to know, like, I hope you're cool. And I'm like praying to God, to Jesus. And they're like, yeah, dude, like, nobody's out here trying to convert you to Islam. We just want to be your friend. And they really did. The cool thing about Somali is called the nation of poetry, or poet, or something or another. So they really have a vested interest in poetry. And that was really the reason that they wanted to be my friend, because I was a poet and they enjoyed my poetry, and they were just willing to like invite me into their world and let me learn something new. And my openness to the scenario really helped everything. And I learned about intimately learned about another culture in someone else's life that I would not have known otherwise. And Nessa Desire gave me a name. She said I had a light. She told me my name was Nuda. And everyone called me Nuda after that. And Nessa Zael and Armin's mom, they both like own like, they have like Somali stores, and they sell like pashminas and all kinds of cool stuff. And they both gave me pashminas to like wear, and I got like a long black dress, and I celebrated Eid with them that year, and I went to mosque and I prayed to Jesus, and I don't know, it was just a cool experience. Went to Golden Corral afterwards. It was popping. And I just spent like the rest of my social time in Columbus, like largely was with my Somali brethren. Like, I definitely feel like I'm Somali. Like, I know I'm not, but I might be. Shout out to my Somali brethren. What's up? And I had never, like, I'd spent, like, I was definitely a Christian, and been to some churches, but I didn't really connect. And I didn't really feel like super embraced by anyone spiritually. Definitely not from my Christian friends at all. And like, they took me in and like treated me like family, and they knew everything about me just because I had made this promise to be open. And it just benefited me in a good way. And the other person, that same week, I met this dude named Sean FM, who, Sean was like, Sean's probably 50 now, but Sean was like a 40-something-year-old dude. He used to model, like, for real. Like, he was in Vogue. He was like a model. He was tall. He was this white dude. He just had a baby. He was engaged to this black woman who is, well, they're not together anymore, but Chantel, just a beautiful lady. And he also heard me do poetry like me, and wanted me to go to like coffee with him. And I just usually would turn down everyone for everything. And I was like, yeah, I'll go to coffee with you. And randomly, me and Deshaun just connected. It was like, I don't know, he was my friend. And like, he became like a part of my support system, like, in Columbus for the rest of the time that I was there. Like, him and my Somali friends, like, I really felt like I had people in that city. And then I kind of got closer to Alex, just because Alex was like the person that knew about my life, and she just was like everywhere. Like, anytime I went to like a poetry event, she was just on the scene, and she was just my friend. And so, and I got closer with Alex during that time, and so like I had like a group of people that were like my people, and it, I don't know, it made my life so much better. And I ended up recording an album. Sean recorded it for me. However, don't look for it on the internet because you're not going to find it. It's just like not good. It could be good if I would have really taken the time to make it good, but I didn't do that. So it is not my best work. It's good writing. It's just not performed well. And the audio quality is even good. It's just like I did not do a good job performing these poems. But at the time, I still sold them. So I was like happy with the product in the end at the time. In retrospect, I just can't. Anyway, so Sean recorded my album. I had my album release party in Gypsies. It was the bomb. Like, I had a dress code. I made everybody dress in black. And everybody kind of came through. Like, it was great. Like, I had a night. So I had like 6 poets go in front of me and like feature for me and like do their poetry. And I would be the 7th poem because my album was called 7. There were 7 tracks. The title track on the album, obviously, was 7. And it was just like Columbus really showed out for me that night. Like I was really, that was like that was like a time in my life where I was like very proud of myself. Like I did this, this was my work. I wrote this, I recorded this, like I put together this album packaging, I creative directed this entire thing, I did, like this was, I did this. And I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't open myself up to those opportunities where people were asking me to do something and I said yes. If I'd have said no, that would not have happened. And like I feel like I'm a better artist because of that. I feel like putting out a body of work, you know, I think I know I struggle with consistency with being an artist and being a creative, but being able to like tangibly put something into the world that you did that is your work, it's like there's nothing that really compares to that. Even though I don't like stand behind the audio at this point, I'm happy that I did it at all, because it was like an experience that, I mean, it just made me be like more enterprising about the things that I want to do in my life. And like it kind of let me know that like what I really want to do is work for me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like for real. Anyway, so that was like a super great experience. One cool thing that happened during that night, which is a super big side note, but I'll share it. So the night of my album release party, I had it at Gypsy's, and I went early to go set up. My friends had come into town from Huntington to help me do all of this stuff, and I was there super early, like putting my stuff together, and there's a dude who walked in and he wanted to like buy a hookah and smoke. And I didn't, who was one of the owners of Gypsy's, was like, yeah, we're having like an album release party here tonight. We're not open. We're just setting up. Like you can come like later. And he was like, really? And he like and then pointed him to me, and he came to me, and like he was the first person to buy my album. And he was just this random dude who just walked in off the street, and he like stayed. It was like 4 or 5 o'clock in the day. Like my night didn't even start until 9. He stayed the whole time. He smoked like a bunch of shishas. By the time it got to like my part of the night, he was like sitting in a booth full of like Somali dudes. Him and a bunch of Somali dudes just sitting around him. And it is packed in this place. Like there were tons of people there for me. It was a good time. But anyway, so the night goes on. I eventually do my set, and during my set I like tell people about my life and who I am and where I'm from and everything. And when it's over, this dude comes up to me and he's like, "You're from Huntington, West Virginia?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, definitely from Huntington, West Virginia." He's like, "I'm from Huntington, West Virginia." I'm like, "You're not. Quit lying. You are not from Huntington, West Virginia, dude. You're the first person who bought my album. That's weird." He was like, "Yeah, I'm definitely from Huntington, West Virginia. My cousin is Bo Harrison." I was like, "What? Miss Harrison's your aunt?" And Miss Harrison was my theater teacher, who, one of the main reasons I even am good at doing poetry in the first place, let's be honest. It was just crazy that the first person to buy my album was a person who went to high school with me, and I didn't know him when I was in high school. And he, but definitely we were at Huntington High at the same time. He was older than me. He actually was a professional soccer player. He played for the Crew, and they had lost in the semifinals or something. And in soccer, if your team loses, you can go to another team and help them advance to finals or whatever. So he was like on his way to DC. He was like on his way out of the city. But yeah, shout out to Chase Harrison. I don't know if he still plays soccer, but he definitely is the first person to ever buy my album. So shout out to you. Shout out to Huntington Connects and random cities. Anyway, so after I released my album and did all of that, I kind of was like done with Columbus. I was in between Huntington and Columbus a lot. And I was like feeling a longing to kind of be in a place that I like knew and I felt comfortable in. And because I was just in Huntington all the time, because right now it's weird. I think I'm a person who like likes to live in two places. I'm not gonna lie, because at the time I felt like, because I'm going to Huntington all the time, maybe I should just move back home. I felt more comfortable there anyway, and I didn't really feel like there was anything in Columbus holding me back. I feel like I had done everything I could do there, and I was happy with my time there. But I also really liked basically being in Huntington and Columbus all of the time. And right now I'm like in Huntington and Baltimore a lot, which is a thing that happens in my life. Anyway, so I moved back to Huntington. I didn't have a plan. I definitely didn't have anywhere to live. I just moved back, and I was just hopping. Like, I was staying at people's houses sometimes. I had a little bit of money, so sometimes I would go back to Columbus. Sometimes I would stay in a hotel. Sometimes I would stay with Sean. It was just like, I was just out there. I really didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a plan, but I didn't like technically live in Columbus anymore. And I eventually ran out of money, and I tried to stay at Faith Mission again, but you can't do, well, I couldn't do that because it was full. And then I went to Cincinnati, and I stayed in a Christian shelter, which was a strange scenario because it definitely was like, they like didn't want you to like go out on your own and do things. Like, it was definitely, I felt like I was in a group home. I definitely got kicked out of there, and I don't really know why. I feel like it's because I led this lady to Christ, which seems crazy, but that's like the last thing I did before I got kicked out of there. So there was this woman there who, she was coming out of rehab, and she like needed somewhere to stay in between like the transitional rehab facilities or whatever, and like she was allowed to stay at this particular shelter, and which I don't really know if it was I can't really say what this place honestly was before. I just googled it, I found it, and I moved to Cincinnati. So I don't really, I can't say for sure what this place was, but nobody was talking to this lady. Like, she was super vulnerable. She was like just off of drugs. She was like trying to live her life right. She was trying, this was like the first time she had been out into like a free world scenario. Well, enough of a free world scenario since she went into rehab. And like, I asked her if she like knew about God, and she said no. And I really didn't expect her to say no. And I was like, really? And so I like gave her a Cliff Notes version of the Bible and told her about atonement and Christ, and like asked her if she like wanted to accept Christ into her heart, and she said yes. I like led a person to Christ, and I don't know if that's the reason. I can't say that's the reason because it was a Christian place. I'm like, why would that be the reason? But I definitely didn't live there the next day. So I left there, and I came back to Huntington rather abruptly and stayed at my friend Maya's house. And then I eventually got a job, and I got a couple of jobs, and then I got an apartment, and I became a roommate with a girl that I had known when I lived in Huntington before. But yeah, she definitely became a drug addict in the time that I wasn't there, and I wasn't aware. That did not work out. And then I moved to Philadelphia randomly, just because that particular year I was like, I was just out there for real, just living my life, young and free, doing what I wanted to do. And so I moved to Philadelphia, and I worked at Ashley Stewart and Macy's, and I was super poor for some reason. Like, I had 2 jobs, but you had to like pay to stay at the shelter, and it was really expensive because like I worked at a mall that was like 52 miles outside of the city of Philadelphia. I forget, King of Prussia or some kind of mall. So like I worked there, and I also worked in like the mall in Center City. So I don't know, I just paid a lot for transportation. I don't really know why I was so poor, because I definitely didn't know. It's really expensive being homeless. Like, because you can't like cook, you can't like, but you have to eat and you have to live, and so you have to do everything in transit, and that's like expensive. Uh, and so yeah, I lived in Philadelphia. That was actually like, even though I lived in a shelter, that was a good time for me. Like, I loved living in Philadelphia. I love Philadelphia. Like, if there's a job for me in Philadelphia, please believe, bye. Like, I don't. I'm done. That's like my city. Like, I enjoy the East Coast a whole lot, but there's not a lot of East Coast cities I would want to like live in. Like, I visit Baltimore a lot because Celica lives there, and it's my homegirl, and Amina's there, and everything, but I don't think I want to live in Baltimore. DC is a no. New York is a no. But Philly is a slick yes, bro. I really love Philadelphia. But I stayed in the shelter. I think it was called Eliza Shirley. It was downtown. It was centrally located, and so it was like easy to access a bunch of stuff, and I don't know, it just wasn't terrible. But Eliza Shirley was the type of shelter that you stay until you're like kind of placed in a shelter that can like help you with housing. And I eventually was placed in a shelter in North Philly, which, listen, no shade to North Philly. I like North Philly, but this place was definitely like an abandoned house. Like, we barely had heat. It was crazy. It was crazy. I was there on Thanksgiving Day. Somebody maced someone, and that was kind of it for me. I was like, I'm definitely out. Like, I'm not doing the macing on the holiday thing. I can't. And so I was like, I don't really know where I'm going in my life. I don't know what I really want to be doing, but it is not this. And I remember like making the decision that I was gonna come back to Huntington, which I had been doing. It was like my, I guess, thing for 2011. Yeah, I remember being like kind of super devastated that like, I think I wanted to just be an artist in a different city. It wasn't Huntington, because I felt like you could get more done in a city where you were an artist, but this just like being in places where I don't know anyone, being maced on a holiday was really like a serious low for me. So I was like, nope, just like, hell no, I'm not doing this. And so I took a train back to West Virginia, and I stayed with my friend Amy for a little bit, and then I met my friend Rachel, Rachel just got married. Oh, God, I love Rachel. Rachel's my baby P. And we lived together, which was like definitely probably the best living scenario I've had with another person in my life. Yeah, we really click on a domestic level. Like, we're the type of people that can sit in a room and not have to speak to each other. She'll watch her shows, I'll play my Candy Crush. Hours will go by and be like, dude, are you hungry? Can we get some food? Then we eat. Then we go back to doing us. And then she goes her way, I go my way. It's not like we don't talk to each other. Like, Rachel's like, for sure, at this point in my life, she's definitely my best friend. But I really like that I don't feel like pressure to say or do anything when I'm around her. We're just sharing space. It's my favorite thing. So I stayed with Rachel for a little bit. Was working at this place, and the thing about it was I was staying with Rachel, but like, she made a bedroom for me in like this back place of her apartment, but it wasn't really a bedroom, and I didn't, want to stay there. And so this dude that I was working with needed a roommate, and I was like, yeah, dude, I live with you. I need somewhere to live. Let's do this. It was a mistake though, because this person was definitely a sociopath. Like, he definitely tried to kill me. He pulled a gun on me. He was crazy. And I didn't really see it coming. Like, I guess I should have saw it coming. I don't really know. Like, after a while, he just didn't want to live with me anymore. And I had like really intense like anxiety about home because it's the thing that I've struggled with the most in my life. And when he said that, I was like, I don't know where I'm going to live though. And so I just didn't leave. But he wanted me to, but I didn't know where I was going to go. And then like one night we had this like argument about it, and then he like came downstairs and he'd thrown the like, mind you, this person was gay. Like, it wasn't like any domestic whatever situation, but like he had thrown the recliner like across the room. Like all the furniture was in disarray. I went into the dining room and there was a gun laying on the dining room table, and I was like I took a picture of it. I called the police, and I called my friend Amy, who at the time was the only person that I told about this, and she was like, dude, get the fuck out of there. This dude is going to fucking kill you. It doesn't matter where you live. Do you want to be alive at all? You gotta go. And so like I went to her house that night, and then that morning my friend Prince called me and told me that Aselika's mom had just passed away, and this was another time me and Aselika weren't speaking, but I definitely like went to her house, and I don't know, we reconnected during that time, and we have not disconnected since then. But nobody was knowing I was going through this like very life-threatening scenario while all this was happening, because, well, you don't want to bring that up when someone's mom just died, especially when you haven't really spoken to them in a long time. And so I just tried to be around her, and then I went to like the funeral, and we spent a lot of time together as a group. At our friend Dominique's house, and then I kind of went back to my life. I went back to that house like an idiot, and he eventually did pull a gun on me. And yeah, I left and I didn't come back then. But I was just really scared because I didn't know, like, obviously I would rather not die, but like if your alternative is homelessness, that's like not ideal either. And so I didn't really know where I was gonna go. I didn't really have anywhere to stay. And I remember that night I was like sleeping on someone's porch, and my friend Joyce called me, and she said, just randomly, it was in the middle of the night too, we weren't even, it's not even that Joyce and I aren't friends, because we are, but like we have a random friendship where like we will just call each other at random times for random reasons, no good reason, just to talk to each other. And so she'd called me just to talk to me that night, and her friend, who like is my friend too, but not like I wasn't as close friends with her as she was, she said her friend was leaving to go back to South Carolina, and I knew her friend was working at this law office. And I remember when I first met, her name's Tree, shout out to Tree. I first met Tree, she told me she worked at a law office. Like, I took that in the back of my mind, and I was like, I'm gonna do that one day. That's what I'm gonna do. And it was like a ram in the bush kind of moment, because she was like, yeah, she's going to, she's moving back to South Carolina like next week or something. And I was like, what? I was like, is there someone taking her place? She was a receptionist at this law firm, Vita & Vita. And she was like, I don't know. I'll see if you can send your resume to her. And then Tree called me the next day like, girl, I need you, because I don't really have anyone I can trust to take my place. And so like I would like for you to like get your resume together and give it to our office manager. And I was like, yeah, it's totally not a thing, I'm doing that. And I went to, there was this church group that I was a part, our campus church group, even though I wasn't really going to Marshall. There's a campus group called, it doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be called Prowl, People Reaching Out with Love, and Dana was the pastor of it. And so I called Dana and I was like, hey, I need you to help me with my resume. I definitely think I'm about to work at this law office, and I yeah, like, I need your help. And we like got my resume together, and I took it there that Monday. I had an interview on that Wednesday, and I was just hired. And I don't really know how. Like, Matt Vital is the attorney at that office. He's a lead attorney. It's his business. I literally just sat in a room with him and talked about football for an hour. And the next thing I know, I had a job, and I worked there for like 2.5 years. And it was the best. I mean, like, Matt Vital, to the end of time, is like, he's definitely done the most for me in my life. Like, we were friends. It was weird because, like, I definitely didn't really fit in that office. And even though this is his office, I don't want to say that he didn't fit in either, but Matt is like, you know, they didn't have similar interests as Matt. And me and Matt did have similar interests. He really liked hip hop. We were just friends. He would like pick me up and take me to work, and he gave me bonuses I didn't deserve. Like, he was like the best in the world. He was super helpful to me, and I don't know why he hired me, but he did. And I got like real office time experience because of him, and I got to work in an office that wasn't completely my fit, but I worked there nonetheless. And then after that, I worked at the first year residence hall at Marshall University. I was the office coordinator there, and then I lost my job, and then I got evicted, and that was like, I was just like, will this journey ever end? Really? Because I really hate losing something and hitting rock bottom, and that had happened so many times. But I had like a few years outside of, like 3 years of feeling like I was like overcoming this hump finally, and then I didn't, and it happened in like a way worse way. Like I couldn't pay my rent, I got evicted, but like before I never really had anything to lose. But like over a few years, like, you accumulate things that you buy and you put in your house. And so all my furniture I bought, everything in that house, I like, that was mine. And my landlord definitely destroyed my property. He stole most of it. He let my neighbors take a lot of it. All of my clothes were thrown across this lawn in a way that didn't make any sense. He took my mattress up, like, he literally cut my mattress up and took the wire out of it. He like cut all of the like cords off of my lamps and my flat irons, like anything that was electric. Like, he was doing a lot for no good reason. Like, and I don't really know why. He kept my TV, he kept my computer, he kept my couch that I had just bought, kept my microwave, he kept anything that he felt like he wanted, and then threw everything else in the street. And then my like, I couldn't be on the property because I was evicted. And so I was just watching this happen, and he was laughing. And then I would like come back, like I would leave and come back, and like my neighbors were carrying my lamps in their house. It was like, what is life for real? Like, it was a tough time. It was really tough. Like, I was able to salvage most of my clothes, but like everything else that I had acquired in that house, I no longer had. And I didn't have anywhere to live again. And so I went to stay with my friend Dominique, and I lived there for a while. And we were roommates, and that didn't work out either. And yeah, then I became homeless again this year, and I'm homeless right now. And I'm definitely trying to figure it out in my life. I don't know. This year's been interesting in that I don't want to say devastated, because that's a word that I've used a lot in this video, but yeah, it's a little bit. It's been a good year, but it's also been a hard year. Like most of my years in my life have been good years, but hard years. But I don't know. I've realized that maybe I'm not able to overcome this hump because I'm like letting it be the thing that is the thing about me. And I don't really feel comfortable sharing it because I know that like so many people have tried to harm me or have harmed me because of the knowledge of my life, that I really try to keep everything I can private. And I know that if I wasn't going through this, I still would be private because I'm just, it's like my natural inclination is to be a private person, but I really don't have anything to lose. And people, like, if someone is going to like do something to harm me because of the life that I've actually lived, then do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck can I actually do? Like, really? So, I'm just gonna, this is my story. This is my truth. This is a life that I've lived, and I, like, don't want to be ashamed about it anymore. I just want to let this be the truth about me, and it's not like the end of my story, and I'm never going to stop until I break this wall, ever, like, ever. And that's just the truth, period. And you know, it's been a hard life, and I don't really dwell a lot on it because it is tough, and it is very depressing. And my friend said something to me. My friend Amy convinced me to do this because she was like, Michelle, like, you need to wear this as a shield, and not as a shield of secret, but like a shield of like, this has been your life, like, you've survived it no matter what it is, and you should, you know, wear it and not be ashamed. Like, you did it and you're still here, and like, don't be ashamed of it. She was like, I've been trying to tell you this for so long, and she has been trying to tell me this for so long, but I just like really, I just don't have anything to lose, so this is what it is. And this year's just been weird and tough. Like, so many people have died this year that it's the strangest thing. Like, there was a poet that like was on the scene with me, and when I was in Columbus, that came up at the time that I was coming up, but he went on to do like amazing things, not just with poetry, but just like in this world. And he was really about like the folk and caring so much about the folk, and I like know what that is. And then like fighting for your folks while you're still in the midst of it in some way is really, really, really hard to do. And his death like really affected me a lot this year. I mean, I know this sounds kind of stupid and nobody cares for real, but Prince's death really jacked me up. Like, Prince is like my favorite artist. He has been since I was 5 years old. And I felt like a strange connection to him because Prince was like a really super mysterious person, also like a very dedicated to being himself type of individual, and that is something I can relate to on so many levels. And the thing that like Prince cared the most about was his privacy, or one of the things he cared the most about was his privacy, and that's definitely something that I feel, and that's how I am in my real life. Like, you really can't do anything to me until you like jeopardize my privacy, and then it's like, who are you anyway? But Prince died in an elevator alone, and being that mysterious and being that secretive, it really doesn't do anything but push people away. And I understand why he was so standoffish, because he'd been hurt deeply by people in his life and whatever, but don't nobody want to die in an elevator alone. Like, wasn't nobody even in his house. Like, it's Prince. And that I was like, that's weird, but that's one of the reasons why I was like, I don't want to die in an elevator alone with nobody. Like, and I shut everyone out and kept everyone like 2 arms lengths away. Like, nobody wants that. I don't want that. I definitely didn't want that for Prince. And I'm sure Prince didn't want that for Prince. Like, Prince was the best and he lived the greatest life and he was like magical in a way that like I can never put words to. But nobody wants to die in an elevator alone. And nobody is there. That's like not a thing anyone wants. And then I've had like, randomly enough, like I'm definitely still trying to stabilize my life, but I've had a weirdly cool summer. Like, I've traveled a whole lot. I've been to a whole bunch of weddings, and I turned 30 this year and had a cool 30th experience, but it was a doozy. Like, July was a mess. I started off July, I had a birthday party, and then the next day I drove to Prince George County. My friend Shireen was getting married, and then the next day was my birthday. But my friend Celica, her dad, he had just come back from Baltimore. He was visiting Celica and her sister in Baltimore for Father's Day, and he had gotten back the day before I was leaving, or a couple days before I was leaving. Yeah, he got back on Wednesday night, Thursday. Yeah, late Wednesday, early Thursday. But when he got off of the train, his blood sugar was low, and he was driving himself home, and he got in a car accident, and he had to go to the hospital because his blood sugar was super low. He fractured his rib, and but they released him like the next day, not even 24 hours later. And I went to his apartment because I like this year I was doing his like budget prep for his just like his grocery budget and stuff, and so I would grocery shop with him. I would like cook for him, and I would make sure he was like on track with what he needed to do. And so I went to his house to like talk to him about what he needed from the grocery store, because he had just wrecked his car and he couldn't drive it, so I was going to go to the grocery store for him. And I did. I went and got a bunch of stuff for him, and then I don't know, I hung out with him a little bit. I cut some watermelon up for him and we talked, and I was like, I just felt like something wasn't right. Like, it just was weird. Like, he seemed okay. Like, they didn't keep him in the hospital for that long. They felt like he was good to go home. He said that he was okay. He just said he was like a little traumatized from being in a car accident, and his rib hurt a little bit, but it wasn't like a big deal. But I just felt like no one was really in town. Like, he went to a church where like there was a conference that weekend. Like, they had a church conference, and he was like really into his church. And like everyone was out of town for that, and I kind of felt like I don't know if I should like, because I had a plan on staying. Like, my plan was to go to Shireen's wedding, then go to another wedding with Celica the next day, and then go to Columbus, and then come back to Huntington. And that's essentially what I did. But after I had seen him, I was like, I don't know if I should like go to Columbus. I think I should just come back to Huntington, because like I don't really feel like he's okay, and I don't want to, just leave and like, he's not kosher. But I went to Shireen's wedding, and I was gonna drive back like the day of my birthday with my friend Jenny, who I went to Shireen's wedding with. Uh, but Aselica was like, no, like, don't go. Like, I want to hang out with you on your birthday. You're 30. And I'm like, yeah, dude, but like, I don't know. Like, I feel like I should go back for your dad. And she was like, I've been talking to dad all weekend. He's super fine. Everything's okay. And I was like, I mean, okay. And she was like, well, can I just come and hang out with you super early in the morning on your birthday? And so she goes to the hotel that me and Jenny are at, and I meet her downstairs, and she like is like, do you not want to go to Columbus with me? Because at this point, we weren't really sure if she was going to go to Columbus or not, because she was going to Chicago, and I was going to go back to Huntington. But like, she would leave from Columbus to go to Chicago, and I would leave from Columbus to go to Huntington. Uh, and she was just going to bypass that Columbus trip altogether and just fly from Baltimore to Chicago. Um, and so I was like, you're not even going to Columbus. Like I'm just gonna go home. And and so that's what I thought I was gonna do. And she was like, well, I'm gonna go to Columbus now. So I'm like, I guess. And we get in the car, and I'm thinking we're going to Delaware, because she told me, she was like, well, we gotta go right now, because Amina, her sister, she said she'd found a car for Amina on Craigslist, and it was in Delaware. Mind you, like, everything on the East Coast is super close together, so it's not like I'm in Baltimore and I'm driving to, like, California. It's like an hour and a half drive to Delaware. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll just come with you. And I get into the car, and they like filled it with streamers and all kinds of Frozen confetti, because Frozen is my favorite movie. And we're like driving to Delaware to get a car, I think. But she took me to the beach for my first trip to the beach, and it was amazing. And I recorded my reaction because I was vlogging, because I was trying to make a birthday vlog. It's on my Instagram. But yeah, we do that, and then we go to the beach that day, and then we go to a wedding that night, and then the next morning or that next afternoon or evening, I don't know when but we drive to Columbus the next day on the 4th of July. That morning I would go back to Huntington, and she stays in Columbus for a couple of days because she's hanging out with our mutual friend who lives in Columbus, and she has family that lives in Columbus as well, and so she stays in Columbus for a couple of days, and I come back to Huntington, and I tell her dad, like we talked to her dad like on the road trip to Columbus, like on speakerphone, and I was like, I'll see you tomorrow, I'll be back in town. But my bus was hours late. I didn't even get to Huntington until 9 o'clock in the morning. I like go to sleep immediately. And I slept for like most of the day. And then the next day, Aselka calls me, and her dad died. And I didn't even go and see him. And I don't know. And then that happened, and then freaking A. I don't know. It's just been a weird year. Like, it's been good. I started a business this year. I started freelancing stuff. That's went well. I've had some jobs. It's not been like the worst year in the world. I've traveled a lot. I've been to a whole bunch of weddings. I turned 30. I had a Quad City 30th. But, like, someone I was taking care of died. Someone that was my friend died. Like, my favorite artist in the world died. I am like still trying to break this wall by myself. And it's not even that I don't feel like it's not going to get any better, because I know that it will. I've had peaks and valleys in my life, like everyone, but there's no but. I'm just going to keep going until I break the wall. That's all I can say. All I know is that I said this to someone this week, and I like truly mean it. It's like, not only is God's grace sufficient, it always has been and it always will be. And that's just the truest thing I can say about my life. Like, this journey that I've been on, I'm sure this has been a crazy weird video because I'm definitely sleepy. It was nighttime, it's definitely daytime now. This journey I've been on is my life. And if I can be proud of my life, then what is the point, really? And so this is like a journey in not being ashamed of who I am and what I go through. Because even though this is like a fairly unique story, it's not unique to people who grow up with no family and are trying to, forge a path on their own. This is what it's like. It's like falling a bunch of times and having to get up and learning a bunch of hard lessons and having a bunch of consequences and just overcoming and continuing to believe in God and continuing to be a person that tries. And so, and continues to be a person who, like, you kind of have to better yourself in these situations. One of the things that I didn't do for so long that I am happy that I've done now, because I don't know if I would have been able particularly to get through this year if I didn't do it. So I started antidepressants, and it's made a big difference in my life. Like, my friend Amy said something to me. She's a person who, I think this is what I was trying to say earlier. She's a person who convinced me to do this, but she's also the person that, convinced me to be on antidepressants. She was like, Michelle, you literally have every reason to be depressed. Yeah, so, do something to help yourself not be depressed. You're definitely depressed, dude, because this is depressing. And I was like, yep, accurate. So, yeah, shout out to Amy. She was supposed to be in this video, but she's asleep right now. I don't know. This is just my journey. This is my truth. I hope nobody... If you watch this whole thing, you a real trooper. And to God be the glory. That's all I can say. God bless.